So I am here with Margaret Kimberley. Hey, Margaret.
Hi.
Hey, so Margaret's an editor and senior columnist of Black Agenda Report website, which on the website it says news, information, analysis from the Black left. And I should say it's not just for Black readers. I read it all the time, and I encourage people to go there and check it out because it's really, I mean, to me, it highlights the distinctions between the establishment liberal sort of Democratic Party perspective and what I consider to be the actual left. I think your website really gets to the crux of that in a way that other websites just don't. I mean, you could go to liberal websites like The Nation we will go to, and to me, it's just become this really homogenized viewpoint of establishment liberal kind of. At this point now, I mean, they endorsed Hillary, but now they'll pivot to Bernie as we see happening. Another thing that your website seems to do, it challenges false narratives.
Yes.
Which are out there. And that to me seems to be one of the biggest, I would say, how come people just don't get the right information? And these false narratives get presented and get propagated out there, obviously through the media. And you really have to dig. You really have to be discerning. You really have to dig.
Yes, you do. Well, it's no accident. The corporate media and the major parties work hand in hand together. And that includes the Democrats. They work, the New York Times, the Washington Post, they just repeat their message over and over and over again and call it news.
Yeah.
And there is this collusion between them. So if you really want to get a left perspective and not a Democratic Party perspective, but a left perspective, you do have to dig. And you, thank goodness for the World Wide Web, because now we can get alternate sources of information, like Black Agenda.
And it also requires that people sort of take a fast or elimination from getting their information from television, because that becomes the biggest, we'll just say, brainwashing tool out there. I hate to be so bombastic, but I mean, that's really seems to be what happens.
Well, it is brainwashing. It is propaganda. I don't think propaganda is too strong a word. The corporate media, the political parties, they work together to make sure that no one thinks outside the box, so to speak, that there is an accepted line of ideas and that no one crosses it. So this is not accidental.
Yeah. So you write, is it a weekly column that you write?
Yes.
And it's called Freedom Rider, which is a really great column. And I look forward to it every week. And just to give people an example, a few weeks back you wrote something called Bernie Sanders and the End of the Democratic Party, which people should go and take a look at. Maybe we can get a little bit into that. Last week, or your current piece is protesting Trump and Hillary too, where you wrote, Trump is a lightning rod, and rightly so, because he should not become the only one. Hillary Clinton is no less terrible, and if Trump is the nominee, she will become even worse. Can you get into a little bit more about what you were getting at in that piece?
Sure. Well, Hillary Clinton in particular exemplifies all the problems with the Democratic Party. The collusion with big business, with finance capital, imperialism. As Secretary of State, I think it's interesting that she gets blamed for everything that Barack Obama clearly signed on to. He was her boss, after all. So they worked together to destroy Libya, to kill thousands of people, to make that country a haven now for ISIS, who we allegedly are our enemies, we're told. Except we made this home for them by destroying this country. So that's the sort of thing that she has done. She and Obama. He should not be let off the hook for that. So she's terrible in so many ways. Now, Trump, of course, but criticizing Trump is easy. It's, shooting fish in a barrel. From building the wall to I'm going to be so tough. And the way he speaks, I find it interesting that sometimes he doesn't really say that much, but the people who love him seem to understand what he means. But on the other hand, sometimes he's to the left of Hillary. He says, I'm not touching Social Security. Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, they all find ways to work with the Republicans to cut entitlements. So she is just as bad. She has not, her husband and Barack Obama, the Democrats are not the lesser evil. They're just the more effective evil. They have better marketing. But they don't do anything for working people. Both parties are imperialistic. Foreign policy, both parties is pretty much identical. So I don't see why Trump would be, aside from emboldening people who are openly racist, and I'm certainly not in favor of that, but it's not clear to me how he would be so much worse. And Hillary Clinton, the things she has done and the things she has said have been horrible. But as long as people think that the Democrats are the only game in town, and that's how they hang on to power, they just bludgeon people with fears of this Republican, as boogeymen and women, that they get a pass. So if you're going to protest Trump, protest her too. In case you can't tell, I'm not going to vote Democratic. I'm going to vote for the Green Party again. And I think people need to stop hanging on to the Democrats for dear life. It's like, hanging on to the sinking ship.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting this year. I mean, Hillary's got perfect cover in Donald Trump. I mean, he is. Yep. I mean, he now has become the face of. I mean, talk about how we projected upon Obama in 2008 of everything we hoped and wanted to be, and now, conversely, everything getting projected upon Trump of everything we fear and hate and we demonize. Now Trump represents, and to her protection.
Yes. Well, she's going to move to the right, and Trump is going to be her excuse. She will be able to get away with anything. If people just live in fear of Donald Trump being president, which, by the way, I don't want to see. I don't want to see Donald Trump as president of the United States, but I don't think he's worse than the other Republicans either. But if we focus so much on stopping Donald Trump, she's going to be able to move to the right. And her argument is going to be, only I can save you from this great evil of Donald Trump. So she will not be questioned the way she ought to be with her positions, as she was a senator, she was Secretary of State. We know where she stands on many issues, but she will be able to obfuscate. She will be able to get away with sweeping under the rug all of the things that people who call themselves progressive say they don't like, because we will be living in fear of Trump.
Yeah. Now, you say we know her policies, what she represents. I mean, I'm not so sure that people do. I mean, I assume that people do. But then you see, first of all, she just shapeshifts for whatever the moment is. I mean, that's always the Republican criticism. But it's a valid criticism of her, that she could do one thing and she could tomorrow say that she's no longer for that thing that she did yesterday, and people just accept it to be true. What's kind of come down is what we call the Bernie broing of the Bernie supporters who are just so would just say so bombastic with their support for Sanders. There's an equal thing happening from the Hillary side, which is people who it's her turn. First of all, it's my turn. I don't know why everybody gets a turn. I mean, it seems like everybody, but apparently she gets a turn, and then I guess Chelsea and the baby, they all get a turn too. I guess in that narrative, So I mean. So there are a couple of things in particular about her position. Mm-hmm. So can you lay out a couple of points about her when you talk about her positions that you find really the most difficult?
Well, first of all, I've often said that Obama won the Democratic nomination in 2008 instead of Hillary because he's a good liar and she's a bad one. So she will. For example, she I don't know why she feels the need to lie so often, but with Sanders, when she spoke of her attempt to get health care reform passed, where was Bernie Sanders? And now there are these photographs of him
right behind her,
right behind her, right beside her. But she is a conservative, as most Democrats are. They are in favor of the bailouts. They say nothing about ending these endless bailouts of the financial services industry. They are imperialistic. Obama got credit for being this peace candidate because he wasn't in the Senate when the vote to invade Iraq, which, by the way, the anniversary, I believe, is today, in fact, from 2003. He admitted, how would you have voted had you been in the Senate? And he said, I don't know. Now, she had this vote hanging over her head, which she now tries to explain away, which she can't. She's on record. So, and as far as domestic policy. She gets blamed for, she tries to take credit for things her husband did as president. So she's got to live with mass incarceration, the war on drugs, the draconian sentences for crack cocaine. That all happened in the 90s when her husband was president. And she now is running as his successor. So, she's stuck with all these things now. And we can't let her forget it. And she must be protested too. I think the ultimate protest is to dump the Democrats, frankly.
So I mean, how do you think that, and to me, I always explain it, that the Clintons seem to sort of mass hypnotize the Democratic Party, no matter what they do. I mean, you can have all this evidence out on the table of what, he did during his administration, of all the damage that it caused economically to different social groups, and to how he was there for business, and, the triangulation of him talking out of both sides of his mouth. And we all know that to be true, but somehow he hypnotizes people in a way that they just kind of want to believe, the opposite.
Well, I have to admit, when he was elected, I was thrilled that he was elected. There had been Democratic defeat after defeat, and huge defeats. Reagan winning by these enormous, losing 1 or 2 states only. And then George Bush, the first elder Bush pair, I guess we could call him, winning again by a very large, lopsided margin. So I wondered, would we ever see a Democratic president again? And to have a Democratic victory was an amazing, it seemed miraculous. And I was one of those, I'm embarrassed now to admit it, but I was one of those who said, we can't complain, we've got a Democrat in office. So anything he does is better than the Republicans. So when they got rid of Glass-Steagall, and that started, that was a bailout of the financial services industry. So then we had the problem with the mortgages and so on and so on. When he lost, the Democrats lost the House and Senate in '94, and Newt Gingrich and the contract with America. And he said the era of big government is over. And we had welfare reform, which meant cutting the bailout to poor people. So but even as he did these things, this fear of the Republicans, and Bill Clinton, he's in a way like Obama, he has this charisma. So in addition to the fear of the Republican, you have somebody who is this larger than life figure. And then of course he would, at the end of his second term, the whole Monica Lewinsky scandal and the attempt to impeach him, people clung on to him more, but that was a scam. Republicans didn't really want him out because then Al Gore would have run as the incumbent and would have won. So, but at any rate, so that increased support for him. So now we are stuck with this love for any Democrat, and but we have to stop. It's time to stop. It's time for everybody to grow up and see where this has where has this gotten us?
Yeah. One of the notions, people on the left believe, if we have a Democratic president, that will at least create a big tent to coalesce the left. And now I'm of the mind that it seems to be more coalesced under George W. Bush, when the left seemed to be more coalesced than under Obama, who split the left.
Sure, absolutely. This happens every time. We will speak out if a Republican invades a country and starts a war. Then people take to the streets. But it's a democratic movement, not a true anti-war movement. Obama was smart enough, as he ran, he said, I'm not against all wars, just dumb wars. And that means not sending U.S. troops anywhere. So he will destroy Libya. He will try to destroy Syria and claim a right to decide who runs that country. But no one says anything because it's a Democrat. And even people who may have some misgivings, and unfortunately there aren't many people who even express misgivings, they just go along with it because it's him, because the guy with the D behind his name and not an R. So this dynamic really does need to change. We can't keep going down this road of claiming to be left only if a Republican is in office. But if a Democrat is in office, making excuses, supporting what they do, no matter how horrible, claiming to be on the left when we're not. And I do wish people who are Democrats would just call themselves Democrats and stop saying they're on the left. Democrat and left are not synonymous.
Yeah.
Leftists are, if you truly are a leftist, are actually against the things that the Democratic Party has been doing.
Yeah. One of the slogans I hear that friends of mine who associate with the Democratic Party say, I'm socially liberal but fiscally conservative, which to
Yeah.
me says you're a Republican who likes gay marriage and approves of a woman's right to choose.
Right.
And
Yeah, that's just a joke. I mean, it's just insulting. A fiscal conservative but a social liberal. Well, that, you know what that is? It's the Republicans of 40 years ago.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons Republicans have a problem winning presidential elections is that Democrats have moved to the right. And they are only left with the right-wing dead-enders who show up in off-year elections so they can control state legislatures or win Congress. But when you have more people paying attention and more people voting, they just vote for Democrats.
Mhm.
The Democrats of today are the Republican moderates of 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's nothing to brag about, to say you're a fiscal conservative. What does that mean, fiscal conservative? The government should be spending money to help people. The government should stop spending money on wars and on defense. Our defense budget is equal to the defense budgets of the rest of the world combined. And that's something that definitely needs to be cut. So it's pretty much a joke.
Yeah.
It,
Yeah. I mean, it is. It seems like what they're saying is that we co-sign capitalism. I mean, let's really get down to it. That we are capitalists and we like the stock market and we like all the riches that, and let's face it, some people that play that game well, I get it. I get why nobody wants to look back and say, hey, you know what, I don't look around me and see who's not doing well in this system. But there are certain personality types, let's face it, who do well under this type of social Darwinism, we'll call it, that capitalism is. And I think that's really what the Democratic Party speaks to now.
Sure, and and instead of questioning, why are we still sticking with capitalism? I mean, capitalism helps a group of people, a smaller and smaller group of people who are getting richer and richer. It certainly doesn't help working people. Living wage jobs are disappearing, the minimum wage, and this is another thing with the Democrats. They controlled Congress and the White House in 2009 and 2010. And if they really wanted to increase the minimum wage, they could have done it, but they don't. So they don't even do the little things, the low-hanging fruit, as I call it, to help working people. So I don't know what people are bragging about. I don't know why people are still clinging to capitalism. Even if you don't understand what socialism is, you should at least be asking the question. You should at least be saying, well, this system doesn't seem to be working for me and for other people very well. Why don't we start thinking about something else? I think that's part of Bernie Sanders' appeal, is that he's saying to people, I don't know if explicitly, this system isn't working for you. Let's start talking about doing something different. He is a leftish Democrat, really.
Yeah.
I don't see him as being a socialist, truly.
Yeah, I spoke with one of your colleagues the other day, Paul Street, about this, and we got into quite a lengthy conversation about the critique of Marxism versus capitalism, which seems to be right in his ballpark. But we got into a lot of this about these assumptions and some of these narratives, these false narratives. I mean, we talked about that. Capitalism enables democracy. People seem to want to believe something that you touched on a little bit. That Republicans stood in or stand in the way of Obama's agenda. Which to me is laughable. That Bernie Sanders is a socialist is another one. So again, let's look at some of these narratives, false narratives, and how do they get out there and become the official narrative?
Well, it's propaganda. I mean, it's just people telling the same lies over and over again. How do we know that you have to have capital? First of all, do we have a democracy? We have elections. Every few years they let us vote. But I don't believe we have democracy. Actually, there are people who've studied this. I believe it was Princeton University that and showed proving what anybody who's paying attention has noticed, that our supposed democracy delivers less and less for us all and doesn't give us basic things that we say we want. We don't get from the system. So how can you call it a democracy? People said Medicare, giving the drug benefit to Medicare. The government should buy in bulk and, pay for people's prescriptions. Instead, we got a law that forbids that forbids us from getting what we want. Americans don't want interventions abroad. Instead, we keep getting interventions abroad. Americans want abortion to be legal. Instead, we see state after state increasing restrictions. So I could go on and on and on with the things that Americans want to see but don't get.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know why we keep saying we have a democracy when all we have elections, and the people who have access to politicians, they get what they want, but the rest of us don't.
Right. Now, in this area of Republicans standing in the way of Obama's agenda, we see now with the current Supreme Court nominee, which seems to me a typical sort of straw man thing that Obama does. He puts up, the Republicans say, well, no, we won't play ball with you. And he says, oh, yeah, I'll give you somebody you like who's a corporatist. Right. And let's see you turn him down. And then they win in either way. And Obama, PR-wise, turns himself into, he's the victim here. Look at him. These white Republican senators, they're really abusing this black president. They won't do what he wants. But they're all playing the same game. And you see now, it's so frustrating in the press to say, I mean, our friends of mine go, look, don't you think they should just give the guy a vote? Look how they treat Obama.
I know. I get angry with Republicans. I wish they were a little smarter. They play to this very small group of people. And it's a strategy that doesn't, as I said, does not help them in national elections anyway. But it always lets Obama off the hook. I have joked that Obama pays the Republicans to do these things. Because always ends up helping him. But this guy he picked, this Merrick Garland, is very conservative. He was a prosecutor. As a federal judge, he said prisoners in Guantanamo didn't have any rights. He's not anybody that I want. So the fact that Mitch McConnell says he won't consider anybody is no reason for, and by the way, that's the stick they use to beat us with. Anybody who wants to say enough of the Democrats. What do people always talk about? The federal judiciary. What about the Supreme Court? What about the federal courts? And we are told whatever else you're mad about, you've got to vote for a Democrat because of the federal judiciary. But this is who we get. So I hope he is voted down. And I would love it if Democrats would speak up and say, this guy is not acceptable to us. So I'd say it's a game of chicken. We all see that. Nobody wants a Supreme Court that potentially can't decide anything because it's an even number and you could have 4-4 decisions. Let the Republicans live with that for the rest of 2016. And then if in next year, if a Democrat wins, then you get who you want. Or you use that against the Republicans in races around the country. Because I don't think it's something that most people agree with. But instead, Obama uses Republican obstruction to be the conservative that he really is. Yeah. And gets buy-in from people who call themselves leftists, even as he doesn't.
Yeah, well, we saw this with what became Obamacare. I mean, that to me was the classic example. If we got a Republican plan from, Massachusetts and the Heritage Way, however that thing came down, but we see how it plays out now. The insurance companies and the drug companies, they're all celebrating. And
well, I call Obamacare Nixon care because it's pretty much what Nixon proposed doing about 40 years ago. So, but because these Republican obstruction, anything can be painted as being left wing if these very right wing Republicans are against it. But that's just not true. So we have this plan that is severely flawed. The best thing about Obamacare is in those states where they accepted the Medicaid money, low-income people in those states made out the best.
Yeah.
But everybody else has these plans with high deductibles that you can't really afford.
Yeah.
There were people who could not buy insurance at any price, and I guess they are helped. But in general, no drug benefit. So, it's a problem. But the Republicans, once again, help Obama in pushing something that is, in fact, conservative and that can be called leftist.
Right, and we have to remember that happened under in his first term, in the first 2 years when he had both houses of Congress with him.
Exactly.
I mean, it's really hard to explain why he didn't push a more progressive plan. But why?
Because he's not a progressive. He didn't want a more progressive plan. So that to me is the simple answer, and then it's held over our heads as, but Obamacare, so now there's this greater prize. as his term ends, the propaganda is increasing. Isn't he the best president? He's the best president ever. Don't you think he's the best president?
It's amazing.
I know. So and that's used to shut us up now and in the future. So if Hillary Clinton should become president, we're supposed to shut up during her term as well, because this is the best of all possible worlds that we can have.
The other false narrative, the one that Bernie is a socialist, and also this sort of political revolution, which I've written about quite a bit, which is laughable to me, because basically the political revolution is vote for me, send me money, and then if I'm president, you'll need to call your Congress people to urge them to do the things that I'm already saying now they won't do unless they get paid to do. So I mean
it's a wrap.
Yeah, it's so and I guess it was Bruce Dixon, writer at Black Agenda Report, who coined the term sheepdogging.
Yeah, well, that's what it's turned out. It's practically impossible for Bernie Sanders has to win all the major states that remain in the primaries, and has to win them by huge margins in order to have enough delegates to be the nominee. So it's not going to happen. He has already said that if he doesn't win the nomination, he will support Hillary Clinton. Now, if he sticks to that, the only way it's a revolution is if he says, you know what, I'm going to run as an independent. I changed my mind.
Yeah.
I think that's going to happen. But people got very upset, and why you call him a sheepdog, and why aren't you taking him seriously? But so far, that's exactly what has happened. Democrats use him to energize people who are more progressive, but then he drops out, and then we're told you don't want Trump to be president, do you? So in the end, everybody that he energizes ends up voting for Hillary anyway.
Right, and you see the sheepdogging is not just Bernie, but it's the sort of establishment media left. These talking heads, and I'm not going to name them but we see them, the ones who take up the airwaves and seem to take up all the space. Have already said that, of course, now we wanted Bernie. Bernie was great. Bernie, the Messiah Bernie, but now we can't have Bernie. Now we're going to have to move to Hillary, and because Hillary, and you see the whole narrative. And it all happens in sort of this big orchestration. I'm just like, I never get, nobody ever calls me to say, hey, do you want to be in on the game? But I don't know how, maybe, I don't know what the quid pro quo is there, but it's just fascinating that you see this whole orchestration happen every 4 years. Whenever a so-called left candidate comes into the Democratic Party and tries to say, here we are, we want to pull it to the left, we want to, I read something yesterday that I posted online that said, if Bernie could do anything at this point, he should, one, demand that the platform reflect some of his demands at the convention. Okay, of course, the writer wanted to say, but no president really ever respects the party platform anyway, so that would go nowhere. The next thing he could do is say that he wants some of his colleagues or request, that she would take on into her administration some people who kind of, colleagues of his. The problem is he has no colleagues in the Senate,
Right.
So the whole thing becomes a wash. And all this, I have a millennial daughter who's supporting Bernie Sanders, What is going to happen is he will be in the rearview mirror, faster than, something on the highway that got hit by a car, and people will forget, and they'll be then getting behind Hillary with signs, and it's her turn, and all this.
Or just, you don't want Trump, do you? You don't want Trump.
Oh,
or people even saying, I don't like Hillary, but I don't want a Republican. So, if he does what he says and supports her, then it's everything that Bruce and others have predicted all along.
Yeah.
But this keeps happening as long as people think they have to stick with the Democrats. It's not the end of the world if we have a Republican, but the Democrats just stay where they are. It's time for the Republican Party is actually cracking up over Donald Trump. I think it's interesting. Talk about not being democratic. If he gets most of the delegates, he gets them. And he ought to be the nominee. Mm-hmm. So now they're trying to stop him. But the people who like him, I think, are not going to be like Democrats. I think the Republicans actually stand a better chance of cracking up than the Democrats do. I think Democrats are more sheep-like, frankly, for all their talk of being, smarter and superior to Republicans. I think Democrats are frankly more likely to keep going down the same road but expecting a different result. But Trump is going to help Hillary move to the right, and is going. I think a Democrat has a better chance of winning nationally, but I think she's going to get an assist from Trump in keeping people from voting. From either people may not vote at all. There may be a low turnout, but I think people will be afraid to vote Green or afraid to vote for another party because of the fear of the Republicans. That will be drummed into us endlessly between now and November. So I think we'll end up with another right wing Democrat who, but fortunately, as I said, she's a bad liar, and she'll be less able to get away with being right wing than her husband or Barack Obama.
Mm-hmm. Finally, there's this thing that's really kind of been nagging at me, and I'm going to get into this later in the week with my conversation with Jill Stein. It seems to me that secularism has become the religion of the left, or certainly of the Democratic Party, in contrast to the right, sort of what happened in the Reagan Revolution. We're going to go for the evangelicals. And there's been this narrative, talk about a false narrative, that people who have faith, they're all in the evangelical wing, and they're all kind of reactionary, and they all don't like Planned Parenthood and what have you. And that there's nobody on the left who belongs to a faith institution, that there are no liberal faith institutions, that we don't talk about them. And I don't know if you remember, maybe about a decade ago, Rabbi Michael Lerner put out a book called The Left Hand of God, talking about this, saying that if the left doesn't start welcoming in people of faith and stop looking down their noses at people who have faith, like a Bill Maher and people like that, who celebrate their atheism as religion, where do we go with that? I mean, where how do you see that?
Well, it's interesting because people of every political persuasion have religious beliefs. I think, in general, I'm generalizing, but I think more Americans are believers than not. Now we have this phenomenon where being religious at all is sneered at and looked down upon. So people, they may not be atheists, but they're a bit embarrassed about speaking of their religious beliefs. And that's very unfortunate for a lot of reasons. That means, as you said, that only people on the right wing are willing to talk about their religious faith and how it determines their views on public policy. A lot of people are motivated by their faith, by Christianity, and being anti-war. I mean, he was more anti-war than Jesus Christ. I mean, so it is unfortunate. I think we have to find a way. There has to be someone who makes this an issue in a way that makes everybody comfortable. And of course, liberals too, are uncomfortable about the idea of possibly making anybody uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So even if they are religious, they don't want to talk about being religious because they're so afraid of insulting someone else. So I think somebody has to come up and say, come on, we welcome everybody. We're a big tent. You don't have to believe what I believe. You don't have to believe it all. I don't care if you're an atheist, that's fine.
Yeah.
But it's unfortunate that we don't have a similar movement on the left.
Yeah, I mean, in my own experience, was Reformed Jewish congregation, and where the social action was really the theology. I mean, and how we were going out and dealing with homeless and dealing with needy people, and that really became more the theology than the theology. And when I explain that to people, they just kind of they think, oh no, there's only priest scandals, there's only these things that go on within faith institutions, and we could just look back at Hurricane Katrina, when the government wasn't there, but then what happened? The faith institutions kind of got together and kind of brought all these relief goods and supplies into the New Orleans area in a way that the government couldn't. So faith institutions have become the safety net of last resort in many ways.
Yes, I think so. I think the government should be the safety net, but you do point out something very important. Even religious institutions themselves are sometimes uncomfortable with stepping forward. I mean, there are exceptions like people like Cornel West, who is an ordained minister, who has been one of Bernie Sanders' most outspoken supporters. There's another problem too. Americans are becoming less religious in general. I think anecdotally, church attendance is down. I don't, in my community anyway, I don't see the same hold of religious faith and church membership that has always existed. So people are becoming less religious all over the country. So while I agree with you, I think that's one of the reasons there has not been this outspokenness. I think there are fewer people like that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think Chris Hedges kind of gets at this in his critique of liberalism and the institutions that, they sort of fail. And I think there's a lot of validity that they're just not speaking the language of the generation now. But to throw the baby out with the bathwater is also, I think, unfortunate because obviously faith speaks to people in their lives in a way that sort of just secular, practical, we just can't solve it in just these practical ways.
That's true, too. But I think part of the answer, too, is for people to be openly leftist and differentiate themselves from what we've been told being left-wing is. I mean, it's ridiculous that somebody like Barack Obama can be called a socialist and be called a leftist. I wish he was, but I think you have to reclaim the term. That's going to mean fighting with people. It's not going to be comfortable. I'm sure you've seen on social media people, debating to the point of, falling out with each other.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for those of us who call ourselves leftists to say what that should mean. And that's going to mean telling people you got to get rid of the Democrats. And a lot of people aren't ready for that. But that's because we have not spoken up as people. Now they'll point to Trump. Trump will be the best, recruiting poster boy for the Democratic Party that, the Democrats have seen for decades.
Yeah.
But I think it's time for people to know, to be told, you get the same thing with the Democrats that you get with the Republicans. Don't be afraid of them losing.
Right.
And I think that's the thing and Ralph Nader, the 2000 election, people who might be willing to think about that, Ralph Nader was blamed for Gore's defeat, and that is still raised and will be raised for some time. But I think we have to stick it out and say the Democrats are the problem. They are a huge part of the problem, and we've got to get rid of them.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Look forward to getting this out online and sharing it with people because whatever we can do to help lift up the conversation out there is a good thing. So
thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.